The city of Whyalla in South Australia is celebrating after the state government placed the Whyalla Steelworks into administration. It follows months of controversy surrounding its operator, GFG, who reportedly owe hundreds of millions of dollars to suppliers. The federal government has also stepped in, offering to bail out the steelworks to the tune of $2.4 billion, of which not 1 cent will go to GFG. To discuss the situation, I'm joined from Whyalla by the city's mayor, Phill Stone. Mayor Stone, I can imagine that the past couple of days, and as we were talking off air, the past couple of months have been very concerning and in many ways confusing for not just the council but also the people of Whyalla and in fact the whole state of South Australia. Given the fact now that the South Australian government has placed the steelworks into administration and within 15 minutes of legislation being introduced, first, what is the feeling going around town at the moment?
Absolutely uplifted. The morale has just gone up. The morale in Whyalla for a long time now has just been going down further and further, not knowing what the future holds with the issues with GFG. I spoke to a worker yesterday at the spoke to creditors yesterday, and they were in awe. They were in rapture. This group of creditors owed a lot of money, sitting around, chatting, smiling, knowing that things were now going to change. The way that this has been orchestrated by the government, I really do give them credit, our Premier and then our Prime Minister. They've both been working together on this to identify a way forward. It had to go forward. The confidence in the owner by the community, by the workers, by the governments had been lost. And the fact that there was nothing in sight, genuinely, that they would be out of the issues, that people were still being asked to work and not being paid. And we've got local contractors, we had job losses. Then contractors were losing contracts. Huge potential for it to ultimately go into administration without government involvement, and you would hate to think the results there. The way it's been done, and we now know, I was fortunate. We had regular updates from the government confidentially about how it was going. We were advocating very much, and I had many conversations with the Premier and Minister Kusantonis during this period with how the city was feeling. But they knew how it was going. They were here regularly seeing it. They weren't doing it from a laptop in Adelaide. They were here on the ground, had many meetings with people. But the whole feeling of the city, the way it's been done, and how it's been explained by the Premier and the Prime Minister has reassured everyone that things are about to change. Sure, it's still going to be a big journey. Still lots of questions to be answered and the fine print and everybody understanding exactly. But the initial announcement from the Premier that contractors will now be paid, creditors will be paid. If you do a job next week, you will be paid next week for the work. And so that has been an incredible reassurance to the workers, to the unions, to business, because it's not just the 2,000 or so people that either work or depend on the steelworks. Everybody in Whyalla, when things go tougher to steelworks, they suffer. The lunch shop is selling fewer lunches. Us Aussies, we drive on our coffee these days, and it's got to be from a coffee shop. None of this instant coffee in your own kitchen anymore. Less cups of coffee being sold. So those sorts of lunch shops have gone from, say, 2 to 1.5 staff, or even less. If they've got half a dozen staff, they've cut them in half. So they're not people working at the steelworks. But one thing that COVID is responsible for is all governments of all persuasions realising how fragile we can be in Australia when our supplies are cut off. Because Whyalla produces 75%, and I think it's even more than that, the structural steel that goes into bridges, buildings, comes from Whyalla. And we do produce, call me biased, but we produce the best steel in the world, far better than cheap overseas steel that unfortunately at times I'm not supposed to use the word dumped, but seems to get here in large quantities. So it was seen essential. Some people have said, well, yesterday, oh, is this just a bailout for GFG? No way. GFG don't see a single dollar of this 2.4 billion. I describe it, for us in Whyalla, that is eye-watering, 2.4 billion investment. And the governments are seeing it as an investment to get people back to work now, to stabilise the steelworks and ensure the essential maintenance that needs to be done is done, and then work with a new buyer with 1.9 billion that they will invest with a buyer, and it will be run their way, not just all handed over, now go to it, guys. So that the governments will have a strong interest in the future to ensure it does stand up. And that is vastly different to when the steelworks went in under Arium, when they went bust 8-9 years ago. Vastly different. Governments weren't involved. There were no strings attached. Arium found a buyer. The buyer bought it. The buyer was going to do this, that, and the other. Unfortunately, didn't eventuate. This is vastly different, and I've got all the confidence in the world, having worked in our small way in Whyalla with the Premier and many discussions with him. I have every confidence. When I'm asked, well, is this still going to be going in 5 or 10 years? You bet your life it is. To see a city I can't help but say this, to see a city that's so excited about a company going to administration is just incredible. Very unfortunate that it had to end up this way, but there were very, very real fears that things would just get worse and may not be able to be recovered. So, yeah, everybody, Daniel, is pretty happy.
When, in your opinion, did you become aware that things were starting to go wrong under the GFG management? Because when I was in Whyalla, of course, when the Premier was there in early 2023, there was this massive event with footy stars. We had the Premier, we had the GFG management, we had yourself there. There was a huge amount of excitement about green steel and the whole renewable aspects that the steelworks was going through, and that this company would be investing tremendous amounts of money. Reopening the steelworks, of course, was a great exciting event, as well as all this other renewable energy that was happening in Port Pirie and Port Augusta, as well as Broken Hill. Where did it all go wrong?
If I look at it from my perspective, 12 months ago, I guess there were definite concerns. Nothing is happening that should be happening. Some of the promises about the getting an arc furnace in, when it's going to be up and running, we could see that those schedules and those announcements, nothing was happening. So I would say at least 12 months ago, there were some red flags going up, but there was the assurance at that stage that funding is being organised. Yes, it will happen. So at that stage, I think there was a lot of faith put in Mr. Gupta with what he was saying. But as things went on, you could see less maintenance was being done. There was cost saving in certain areas. And when you start hearing stories negatively from workers that should know what's going on, I think a few more red flags were going up. But then at that stage, the blast furnace issue. So anything else lost focus while they were trying to get the blast furnace back up and running. A lot of concern then, because it was going on so long. They'd start, then they'd go backwards. Morale certainly went down then. Well, what if the blast furnace can't get back online? You don't have a blast furnace, you don't have a steel industry. You take away a steel industry from Whyalla, do you have Whyalla? It's as basic as that, because people, I guess also from the eastern states, far abroad, that don't really know what happens in Whyalla. While we've got other industries, Whyalla is here because of mining and steelmaking. Without that, we've got issues. And so it was really pleasing news that the blast furnace came back online, but then the ongoing issues, the lack of advancement on some of the promises made, a lot of information, yes, we're on top of this. So I guess to cut a long story short, it was gradually growing and there was concern. And of course, even our community right now, they're saying, oh, what happened yesterday should have happened 4 or 5 months ago. Well, to do what happened yesterday and Wednesday is you don't just do overnight. There's got to be a lot of planning, a lot of work behind the scenes, because although people are just saying, look, kick the owner out, take it over and nationalise it, it's not that easy. And so I would have, now that I know how the government did it and how much time went into the planning, I can understand why they had to choose the right timing. The owner probably is not very happy about it. We as a city and we as a council were doing our most to support him for as long as we thought things were going okay. But then you had to move away and think, no, this is not good for our community. There has to be another way, and the only other way is through government.
We're looking at what the government has been doing, both state and federal. First, we do have the SA government has placed the steelworks into administration, with Corthamantha being the administrators, and they will look for a buyer. We also have over $2.4 billion announced by the federal government and the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese as a package, not just for the steelworks itself, but also for the personnel. To my understanding, there are going at the moment no job losses, and that the steelworks is going to be still operating. Is that correct?
Most definitely. The way they've done the packages. In fact, Wednesday, before the big announcement here, I had a phone call from the administrator who was in the car on his way to Whyalla, looking forward to catching up with council, meeting with us, and to see where we can fit into the equation as well. So look, work was starting before I think probably it was all official. And the Premier went to great pains to tell contractors and creditors that part of their package, their initial package, I think the first package is about 100 million, there is money in there specifically to pay out creditors. A little bit of paperwork for everybody to do, but it will be there. None of this, oh, yes, put it in and we'll get around to it. He is adamant. You get your paperwork done, you get it in, you will get paid. And that there will be no job losses. They've been very clear on that. And the aim is, obviously, now that it's under administration, to get it back on track and actually start taking on more employees, because obviously there's been quite a few that have gone either voluntarily or otherwise. Since all the problems started, there's going to be a lot of maintenance needed. So there's going to be a lot of work for contractors to come back on to site, which will be fantastic.
We know that one of the big things that for the steelworks, as well as the Iron Triangle in general, has been the use of green steel, as well as blue hydrogen, green hydrogen, other renewables, and more environmentally friendly and more technologically advanced ideas. We've seen all the projects happening around Port Augusta and Port Pirie. What do you think could be the future for Whyalla? Is green steel part of that future? Or do you think that it will have to be something else?
I think green steel is certainly part of the future. The first priority will be to get the business back up and running. I would imagine to be turning out as much steel as possible. And then once they get a new buyer, I would see the government and the new buyer sitting down and looking at the future, because that is one of the reasons that 1.9 billion, I mean, for us to be talking about that in Whyalla, hey, that's a big bag of money, Daniel. And that will, I would imagine that would be all part of the government's plan, that they got the new buyer, new owner, they will talk turkey about the future, what investment they will expect from the new owner and the investment they're putting in, because steelworks are still going that way by necessity into green steel. So I think you'll find that still on the cards, most definitely. Not continuing blast furnace technology. Look, that was great when it was first invented. The world has had to move on. The world's got to change. So I would imagine the green steel changing to electric arc. I'm pretty sure both the Prime Minister and the Premier have used that in some of their speeches, that's what they'll still be looking at, because that's the way it has to go.
And has there been any potential time frame? Has the Premier or the Prime Minister said about, or the administrators themselves asked about how long they are potentially looking for a buyer while the company is under administration?
Not publicly. They might have that privately, which I'm not aware of. The Premier did say that last time it was under administration, that was for about 17 months. Hopefully this one, because it's a different outcome, won't be that long. But no timelines have been given other than administrators on site. They started as soon as they got here, liaising with creditors. So things will certainly be happening from right now, and it will just keep going.
And as you mentioned earlier, the steel from Whyalla is exported interstate. We have, of course, steel refineries here in Tamworth, and we know the importance of, as you mentioned, all the construction projects. If the steelworks, for whatever reason, was to be shut down, we know, of course, the devastating effects that would have on Whyalla and South Australia, but what kind of effects could that have on places that import steel like Tamworth?
Daniel, that's not in my vocabulary to answer a hypothetical question. If the steelworks closed down, it will not close down. End of story. No question to answer there.
That's certainly good to know. And how has you as Mayor and the Council been reacting to the events over the next few days? It's, as you mentioned, it's quite unusual for there to be applause and excitement among locals for a company to be put into administration. And we even have the possibility that the federal government might look at buying a stake in the steelworks itself.
Oh, I hadn't heard that one, but hey, a dollar's a dollar. Wherever it comes from. But I think the important thing is that both governments recognise the importance of Whyalla and Whyalla Steel, not just for Whyalla and South Australia, but the nation, the significance there. Also, you can't let a city, we're still a city, we are a city, countrified town, I call us. We don't have traffic jams. I always say a traffic jam here is actually having to stop at the traffic lights. Great lifestyle, great people. Yes, Whyalla's got that tag for being, well, we've been resilient, gets a bit overused at time. Even before this announcement, there was still positivity, look, we'll get over it, but there was only a handful of people that were really thinking we would get over it without government intervention. And the intervention is just perfect. Regrettably, it had to be done. Normally, you like to see a business trade out of its issues, because I know one of the things both governments were very concerned about is that if they put a company into administration, the unintentional consequences, you often got to be careful what you ask for, that there might be an outcome you don't like. I think that is also one of the reasons this has probably taken a little bit longer than some people would have liked to come up with this, but to come up with something that will work and will have the minimal negative impact on the community. And what has been delivered so far and announced, it's just got everybody really, really flying high. It is a great way to end a week, particularly, Daniel, after the last crazy days in Whyalla. It was a. People asked me yesterday, how did I feel when the Premier made the announcement, and we were watching it in the CEO's office, the TV of it, and we all just had this weird feeling. This is something earth-shattering that we've been expecting. I believed it was coming very, very, very soon. The suddenness and the speed really took me by surprise. I believed it was just around the corner. But that first feeling, I've talked to others about this, and it was just like some major, is this really happening? And even some of the workers were saying they've got to pinch themselves. This is correct. And again, talking to some of the workers as well as the creditors at the announcement at the Steelworks yesterday, the workers have got that extra spring in their step because they can now see things happening that they're worried about, the maintenance coming back. So everybody, I know there would have been a pub in Whyalla last night that would have done some extra business with a fair bit of celebration while I'm home in my recliner trying to stay awake to watch the news.
Mayor Phill Stone, thank you so much for joining us.
Look at the smile. Yeah, you haven't seen this for a long, long time. It is a pleasure after what I've had to go through and others with the speculation leading up to this. And, of course, when GFG weren't putting much information out and we knew things were going bad, yeah, good old Mayor of Whyalla, he'll know everything and he'll tell us everything. Well, he doesn't always know everything, and sometimes he can't tell you everything. But although yesterday was thank goodness the day's over type day, it was a pleasure to be able to talk positively without straddling that very sharp picket fence. So, yeah, it's a long time that you haven't seen so many of these in Whyalla. So it is good news. Yeah, still a lot of work ahead, but now the whole town, the whole city, the government, everyone can move forward and really look forward to the future now.
Mayor of Whyalla, Phill Stone there.